Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the world around you no longer makes sense. The faces of loved ones seem unfamiliar, everyday objects appear distorted, and worst of all, you begin to question whether your own thoughts are even real. From people who believe they are trapped in a staged reality to those who mistake their own family members for imposters, these disorders offer a chilling glimpse into the fragile nature of the mind. In this video, we'll explore 6 of the most disturbing and rare mental disorders. Stay tuned and watch this video till end. Number 1. Dissociative fugue. Dissociative fugue is a rare and unsettling mental disorder where an individual completely forgets their identity and past while simultaneously exhibiting no confusion or distress about their condition. Unlike typical amnesia, which is often accompanied by disorientation and anxiety, those in a fugue state remain fully functional and can even travel long distances as if searching for something unknown. The most terrifying aspect of this disorder is that individuals may start entirely new lives under different names, appearing completely normal to those who meet them in their altered state. To their families, they become missing persons, while to the outside world, they seem like ordinary people. The condition remains largely mysterious, though it is strongly linked to amnesia and dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder. The causes of dissociative fugue are still not entirely understood, but it is believed to be triggered by severe psychological trauma, physical abuse, extreme stress, or even psychotropic substances. In rare cases, it has been associated with dementia. Thankfully, no documented cases suggest that dissociative fugue is a permanent condition. Patients eventually emerge from their altered state, only to find themselves in an unfamiliar place with no memory of how they got there. While some regain their past memories quickly, others struggle to recall anything about themselves for extended periods. One of the most notable cases of dissociative fugue occurred on September 10, 2006, when Jeffrey Allen Ingram woke up on a sidewalk in Denver, Colorado. The confusion of waking up outdoors was only the beginning of his ordeal. He had absolutely no memory of who he was or how he had gotten there.
It was early in the morning. I'm not sure at what time. Looked like the sun was just starting to come up, so there was some light there. I was half picking myself off of the ground, and I had no idea where I was. I didn't recognize no buildings, no streets. No, nothing.
As dawn broke, he struggled to lift himself off the ground, surrounded by unfamiliar streets and buildings. In a desperate attempt to find clues about his identity, he searched his pockets, but all he found was $8 in cash. Hoping for assistance, he approached passers-by, yet they dismissed him as a homeless man or someone under the influence of drugs. With no clear options left, Jeff decided to find a hospital, believing that medical professionals might be able to help him recover his lost memories.
And it was extremely, extremely terrifying. They turned me away as if I was, someone that lives off of the streets or was some kind of a psychotic person, like you don't know where you are kind of thing.
However, without any money to pay for transportation, he had to walk for 8 straight hours before finally reaching Denver Health. His troubles were far from over. At the hospital's admissions desk, he was asked for his name, but he had no answer.
I ended up walking into Denver Health. I walked up to where they take the admissions and stuff like that, and said, I need help. They go, okay, well, what is your name? I said, I have no idea. That's what I'm here for. She says, well, you got to put something down. I said, I don't know my name. Like, you guys don't understand. So they just gave me a name and stuff there, John Doe. Still drilled me, what's your name? I said, I don't know. And I'm in tears at this time. I'm shaking really, really bad. I can barely stand up.
The hospital staff insisted that he provide some form of identification, but he had none. Eventually, they assigned him the name John Doe and admitted him. Jeff was overwhelmed with distress, shaking and crying, unable to comprehend what had happened to him. Over the next 6 weeks, doctors tried everything: medication, therapy, and psychological evaluations, but nothing restored his memory. With no other solution, Jeff decided to make his case public in hopes that someone would recognize him. On October 22nd, he appeared on national television to share his story. As he spoke, the stress and frustration were evident in his voice.
I don't know. It's hard to explain. I just try to look for information in my head, and it's not there.
It's just blank.
Yeah.
What's the hardest part about that then? About not knowing?
It's very stressful, yes.
Can you do me a favor? Can you take off your hat so we can see what you look like without the baseball cap? Because people may remember you that way. And do you know if you always wore glasses, or you just have no idea?
I have no idea.
Why don't you take those off as well so we can see what it looks like without the glasses?
He struggled to explain what it felt like to have no past, no identity, and no sense of self. Then, in a stroke of luck, his fiancée, Penny Hansen, saw his television appearance and immediately contacted the authorities. To prove her claim, she provided photos of them together. The truth about Jeff's identity soon surfaced. He was a 40-year-old machinist from Olympia, Washington. On September 6th, just days before he woke up in Denver, he had set out on a trip to Canada to visit a close friend suffering from terminal cancer. The emotional strain of knowing that his friend was dying likely triggered his dissociative fugue. Shockingly, this was not the first time Jeff had experienced such an episode. In 1995, he had vanished for 9 months before eventually regaining his memory. However, his 2006 fugue state lasted much longer, and he did not regain his identity even after reuniting with Penny. It took him years to fully readjust to his old life. To prevent future episodes from causing similar chaos, Jeff took precautionary measures. He wore a GPS tracker in his shoes, tattooed his identification details on his body, and carried a zip disk with his medical records. One of the most bizarre aspects of his case was a false memory he recalled while still in his fugue state. Jeff was convinced that he had previously been married and had 2 children who were tragically killed in a car accident caused by a drunk driver.
What came out of that? Any clues?
A few clues that I might have worked in New York or in the New York area. That I did have a family.
That you did have a family?
A wife and 2 kids, and they were all killed in a car crash somewhere by a drunk driver. Maybe in the New York area, we're not sure.
However, Penny confirmed that Jeff had never had any children. This unexplained memory remains a haunting mystery. Number 2. Alien hand syndrome. Alien hand syndrome is as unsettling as it sounds. In this condition, an individual loses voluntary control over one of their hands, usually the left. The affected hand moves unpredictably, often contradicting the individual's conscious actions. Imagine turning on a light switch only for your own hand to immediately switch it off, or worse, attempting to eat and having your hand slap the food away. In extreme cases, the alien hand can become aggressive toward its owner, even attempting to strangle them. The exact cause of alien hand syndrome remains unknown, but it is commonly observed in patients who have undergone split brain surgery, a procedure in which the corpus callosum, the bridge of nerves connecting the 2 hemispheres of the brain, is severed to treat severe epilepsy. This drastic procedure isolates the 2 halves of the brain, which normally work in harmony. The left hemisphere, responsible for speech and rational thought, loses its ability to communicate with the right hemisphere, which controls the left side of the body. Without verbal expression, the right brain appears to act independently, using the left hand as its only means of communication. A well-documented case of alien hand syndrome is that of Karen Byrne from New Jersey. At 27 years old, she underwent split brain surgery to manage her epilepsy, and while the operation was successful, it triggered a bizarre side effect. Shortly after surgery, she noticed her left hand moving on its own. The first incident occurred during a visit to her doctor when she realized, to her horror, that her left hand was unbuttoning her shirt without her awareness. When she tried to stop it, her right hand would rebutton the shirt, only for her left hand to start undoing it again. Karen's condition worsened as her left hand began interfering with her daily life. It would put out cigarettes as soon as she lit them, remove objects from her purse without her knowledge, and even lash out at her, causing physical harm. She lost several personal belongings before realizing what was happening. The most chilling aspect of her condition was that her left hand sometimes acted aggressively toward her, reinforcing the eerie idea that a part of her brain had developed a mind of its own. If the split brain theory is correct, it raises profound questions about human consciousness and identity. Does each hemisphere have its own sense of self? If so, what happens when they are separated? Alien hand syndrome offers a disturbing glimpse into the complexity of the human brain, and while medical science has made great strides, our understanding of consciousness remains far from complete. Until we uncover more about these rare and eerie disorders, they will continue to challenge our perception of identity, control, and the nature of the human mind. Number 3. Card syndrome. Card syndrome, also known as Cotard delusion or walking corpse syndrome, is a rare and terrifying mental disorder where individuals believe they are dead, non-existent, or have lost their internal organs or blood. This condition was first identified in 1880 by the French neurologist Jules Cotard, who initially classified it as an unrecognized form of depression. He observed that patients suffering from this disorder exhibited severe depressive symptoms, ceasing to take care of themselves, losing all emotional expression, and deriving no enjoyment from life. However, later studies revealed that Cotard syndrome is not a disorder in itself, but rather a symptom of extreme depression and anxiety that can lead to psychosis and schizophrenia. Additionally, near-death experiences can sometimes trigger similar effects. People who briefly lose consciousness after a traumatic event or medical crisis, such as a cardiac arrest, may experience dissociation upon regaining consciousness, leading them to believe they are no longer alive. A well-documented case of this phenomenon is that of Army veteran Warren McKinley, who suffered a severe motorcycle accident. Although he survived, the stress and head trauma, particularly in the frontal lobe, led him to develop Cotard syndrome. He later described the experience as feeling like a ghost, an entity that merely existed without purpose or emotion.
What I felt was, what's the point?
And that's how you felt emotionally. What's the point?
Why I was at Headley Court and they were trying to help me and
to rehab you.
And I was just...
You felt like a ghost, didn't you?
What's the point?
Like a ghost, dead man walking.
Yeah.
Modern research has also established a strong correlation between Cotard syndrome and damage to brain regions responsible for facial recognition. When an already anxious individual looks in a mirror and fails to recognize their own reflection, they might draw the delusional conclusion that they must be dead. Neuroscientists have mapped the 3 key stages of Cotard syndrome, and the most chilling aspect is how it initially resembles typical depression. The first phase, known as the germination stage, includes symptoms such as insomnia, loneliness, and a lack of interest in work or personal life. The second phase, the blooming stage, is when the disorder fully manifests, with patients believing they are missing body parts, already dead, or even completely non-existent. The final and most terrifying stage is the chronic stage, in which delusions become deeply ingrained. Patients at this stage often refuse any medical help, convinced that there is no point since they are already dead. At this stage, Cotard syndrome can take one of 2 primary forms. In about 55% of cases, patients develop a delusion of immortality, believing they have lost their vital organs but still move and function. Instead of concluding they are physically well, their psychotic state convinces them that they are undead, cursed to exist eternally. This was the case of the first documented Cotard syndrome patient, a woman referred to in Jules Cotard's case report as Mademoiselle X. She firmly believed she had no brain, no nerves, no stomach, and no intestines, just skin and bones of a decomposing body. She denied the existence of both God and the devil, and felt she did not need food since she was already dead. Tragically, without any known treatment at the time, she eventually succumbed to starvation. On the other end of the spectrum, the disorder can become an unending nightmare for those who develop an overwhelming sense of nihilism. A particularly disturbing case from 2010 involved a retired 65-year-old teacher referred to as Mr. B in medical reports. For simplicity, let's call him Brian. His decline started with general depressive symptoms, including sadness, social withdrawal, anxiety, poor sleep, and loss of appetite. However, his condition rapidly worsened as he began experiencing catastrophic delusions, believing he had lost all his assets and had become destitute. His sense of nihilism deepened, making him convinced that his organs had ceased to function and that his house was deteriorating, about to collapse. Brian's despair escalated to the point where he attempted to take his own life, fearing he would spread a deadly infection to his village. Even after being hospitalized, he made 2 more attempts before becoming fully convinced that he was already dead. He refused to eat, believing it was unnecessary. Fortunately, doctors were able to diagnose him with Cotard syndrome in time, and he was treated successfully. Unlike 140 years ago, when Jules Cotard first described the condition, modern medicine now offers treatment options such as electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, and psychiatric medication. While Cotard syndrome is not officially classified as a distinct mental illness in diagnostic manuals like the DSM-5 or ICD-10, advancements in neuroscience and brain imaging technology have improved our understanding, making it increasingly possible to manage and even reverse its symptoms. Number 4. EBOM syndrome, also known as delusional parasitosis. People suffering from this condition believe they are infested with parasites such as worms, mites, bacteria, or even rodents. Although the disorder itself does not directly harm the body, the compulsion to rid oneself of the imagined infestation often leads patients to cause severe physical harm. Some individuals repeatedly scratch or cut their skin, while others douse themselves in hazardous chemicals like pesticides, leading to poisoning and respiratory failure. Unlike Cotard syndrome, where delusions revolve around non-existence, delusional parasitosis is defined by an unshakable false belief. Those suffering from it are utterly convinced that they are infested, even when presented with medical evidence to the contrary. Consequently, many refuse psychiatric treatment. A tragic case occurred in Colombia in 2017 involving a 53-year-old woman who had suffered from EBOM syndrome for 5 years. She experienced depression, constant itchiness, and hallucinations of parasites crawling under her skin. In an attempt to exterminate the imagined infestation, she frequently bathed in toxic chemicals, further damaging her body. When she finally sought medical help, she arrived at the hospital with samples she claimed were parasites extracted from her skin. However, laboratory tests revealed they were merely flakes of dry skin, likely picked off by her own scratching. Despite multiple examinations confirming she was physically healthy, she remained convinced that parasites were eating her from within. Doctors recommended psychiatric treatment, but she refused, distrusting their diagnosis. It is unclear whether she ever received the care she desperately needed, but given her firm rejection of medical intervention, her prognosis was grim. Fortunately, there are treatment options for those willing to seek help. Antidepressants, cognitive behavioral therapy, and antipsychotic medications have proven effective in managing symptoms of delusional parasitosis. However, the biggest challenge remains convincing patients that their affliction is psychological rather than physical. Many, like the woman in Colombia, resist treatment, believing that medical professionals are simply ignoring their plight. Number 5. Visual agnosia. Visual agnosia is a rare neurological disorder that affects an individual's ability to recognize objects despite having normal eyesight. People with this condition can see the object in front of them, but struggle to identify it correctly. They might perceive colors and shapes, but fail to associate them with the object's meaning. Some individuals describe seeing a collection of visual elements punctuated by recognizable faces, which stand out more than anything else. For example, someone might be unable to read words or music notes despite recognizing faces easily. Instead of identifying objects based on their form, they rely on color and other sensory cues. A person with visual agnosia might mistake a chair for a small child or misidentify a pink smartphone as a bar of soap. Though extreme cases are rare, the disorder often leads to confusion between objects of similar shapes. Visual agnosia has multiple subcategories, each affecting different aspects of perception. Individuals with alexia, for example, struggle to distinguish between words and perceive all text as the same, making reading impossible. Others with environmental agnosia fail to recognize their surroundings, making navigation extremely difficult. The condition provides insight into the complex workings of the brain and the consequences of disruptions in visual processing. Visual agnosia can develop due to brain trauma, such as a stroke or head injury, but it is more commonly associated with aging-related neurodegenerative conditions like dementia. It does not manifest suddenly. Instead, symptoms emerge gradually, starting with occasional misidentifications before worsening over time. One of the most famous cases of visual agnosia was documented by neurologist Oliver Sacks in his book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. The title references the experiences of a patient known as Mr. P, whom Sacks called Peter for simplicity. Peter was a singer and musician who later became a music teacher. His symptoms began when he failed to recognize students' faces, identifying them only when they spoke. Over time, he started seeing faces where there were none, mistaking fire hydrants and parking meters for students. His perception deteriorated to the point where he interacted with carvings on chairs, expecting them to respond. Peter ignored his condition for years, dismissing it as insignificant, until he developed diabetes and consulted an ophthalmologist, concerned that his eyesight was failing. The ophthalmologist, realizing the problem was neurological rather than visual, referred him to Oliver Sacks. During Peter's examination, he could recognize basic elements such as color and shape, but struggled to interpret entire scenes. The most shocking moment came at the end of the visit when Peter attempted to grab his wife's head, mistaking her for his hat. This confirmed his diagnosis of visual agnosia. Unfortunately, there was no effective treatment, so Peter adapted by using his other senses to recognize people and objects for the rest of his life. His case illustrates the brain's remarkable adaptability in response to severe cognitive impairment. Number 6. Truman Show Delusion. Truman Show Delusion is a disorder in which individuals believe they are the protagonists of a reality television show. Those affected think the world around them is an elaborate set filled with hidden cameras recording their every move. The condition is named after the 1998 film The Truman Show, in which the protagonist, Truman Burbank, unknowingly lives inside a massive, televised simulation of reality. Individuals with this delusion believe that everyone around them, including friends and family, are actors performing in a scripted production. One patient described his experience by stating, "I realized that I was the center of attention for millions of people. My family and everyone I knew were actors in a charade designed to make me the focus of the world's attention." Medically, the Truman Show delusion is a symptom of psychosis and is often linked to early-onset schizophrenia. One of the most notable cases was that of a 26-year-old man named Albert from Pennsylvania. Leading a relatively normal life, Albert worked at an assembly plant and lived with his parents. However, in 2002, he suddenly traveled to New York City and attempted to enter the United Nations headquarters. When security stopped him, he attacked a guard and was subsequently taken to Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital. There, psychiatrists Joel and Ian Gold discovered that Albert believed he was the star of a massive reality show. He was convinced that tiny wireless cameras had been implanted in his eyes to broadcast his life, and even believed that the 9/11 attacks had been scripted plot twists to add drama to the show. He had traveled over 200 miles to seek help from the UN, hoping to escape his fabricated reality. Albert was ultimately diagnosed as the first documented case of the Truman Show delusion. Since then, hundreds of similar cases have been recorded, with the Gold brothers identifying multiple patients suffering from the same condition. As surveillance technology advances and cameras become smaller and more pervasive, the frequency of these cases may continue to rise. That's all for this video. We hope you have found this video informative and interesting. Which of these disorders do you find the most disturbing? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon for more interesting videos like this. Thank you for watching our video.